Marc Morano on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back. This is Marc Morano. We're talking with now Byron Soepyan, Science Research Associate with the CO2 Coalition. He is a Ph.D. in Chemical Engineering. And welcome to the program, Byron.
Thank you, Mark. I am very happy to be here.
Okay. Did I say the name right? Soepyan?
It's actually Byron Soepyan, yes.
Byron Soepyan. Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so you're with the CO2 Coalition. First of all, tell us a little bit about what the CO2 Coalition does. I opened the show, I don't know if you heard it, talking about Dr. John Clauser, who recently joined your board, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist, and who's recently been canceled by an IMF dinner. But go ahead and tell us what your mission of your group is, or what your group works on, the CO2 Coalition.
Okay, so the goal of the CO2 Coalition is to use real science to prove that CO2 is beneficial for society and the planet, and that fossil fuels are beneficial for society and our planet, and that there is no climate crisis whatsoever.
Okay, so in that vein, how would you sort of evaluate the whole climate change issue today? As I opened the show, I was on Fox Business, and I actually had I was challenged by the Fox Business host Stuart Varney, claiming, this is the hottest days and the hottest year, and we're at unprecedented heat waves. And then we also have all these protesters trying to shut down airports and traffic, and you have governments now banning short-haul airline flights and banning gas-powered cars and thermostat controls and trying to regulate meat and, of course, our energy. What is it all based on? I mean, is there any justification to do any of that?
No, there's no justification whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I recently compiled the temperature data for the 4th of July over the years, and we see actually a decreasing trend over the years. So instead of increasing, the temperature has been decreasing on the 4th of July. And again, all these regulations, they do not make any sense. As I mentioned, the climate change is normal because the climate is dynamic, but there is no climate crisis. And again, these regulations, all they're doing is making people's lives miserable.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's a great way of saying it, because they're basically trying to collectivize everything. They want the government to take over other aspects to manage and do the population. But in terms of what people propose as solutions, there's that end, but there's also the end of people who, like Bill Gates, for instance. He's trying to fund money, billions of dollars, through Harvard University, and the Biden administration is open to block the sun, or you have carbon capture technology where people are investing billions. Republicans love carbon capture because they say, we'll capture the carbon, bury it under the ground, and then we can have our fossil fuels and not worry about climate crisis. Well, first of all, what do you know about, or what is your comment on Bill Gates and the Biden administration now funding and looking into blocking the sun by injecting, I guess, forms of aerosols into the sun to block it, to cool the earth? Is that a great idea?
No, not at all. We need the sun because, again, exposure to the sun is healthy. Vitamin D and all that. And also plants need the sun to thrive and grow and for food production. And so therefore, blocking the sun is a terrible idea. And secondly, Gates and Biden are contradicting themselves by trying to inject chemicals into the atmosphere because, I thought that all the climate change advocates, they want to reduce the number of pollutants in the atmosphere, yet now they're saying they want to increase it.
Yes, it's you don't know, the people, all these pro-organic food, and people who are afraid of any kind of chemicals on your apple suddenly have no problem with whatever Bill Gates wants to inject in the atmosphere. It's kind of a bizarre thing. What about direct carbon capture? Again, Kevin McCarthy, the House GOP speaker, is a big proponent of this. Republicans, if you ask the Republican leadership on Capitol Hill what they want to do to solve, they'll say climate change is a problem, we need a solution, and they'll say we need to plant trees. They want to plant, I don't even remember the number now, 1 million or 1 billion trees, and they want to capture carbon. What are your comments on both of those? Will planting trees save us from a climate emergency?
Okay, so first of all, there is no climate emergency. There is no climate crisis.
I'm being facetious.
I know. It's okay, don't worry about it. And also about carbon capture, I mean, in my opinion, it does not make any sense because carbon dioxide is actually beneficial for society and the planet because, for instance, increasing the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere actually promotes plant growth, which increases food production. And therefore, we are better off not capturing the CO2 or the carbon dioxide, but instead just releasing them into the atmosphere. And as for performing carbon capture, I mean, the big question now becomes, what are we going to do with the captured CO2? I mean, if we were to sequester it underground, first of all, where are we going to store them? Do we have enough of these storage sites? And what are the carbon dioxide going to do underground? And what's the impact of having all these carbon dioxide underground?
And what is, I mean, that's a great question. So with carbon capture, why does it have such a wide appeal at this point? I mean, could it actually make a dent in atmospheric CO2? And what kind of scale would you be talking about to actually do that? In other words, could you just vacuum out carbon dioxide, like just pick that one gas, or maybe add methane or something else to that and just sort of suck it out? Do you foresee, is there even technologically fantasies about doing that to that extent?
I don't, in my opinion, I don't think it's feasible. I mean, the atmosphere is, okay, we have a lot of gas in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is very heavy and there's a lot of carbon dioxide in there. And how are we going to capture them all? I mean, I don't think it's feasible given our technology and our capabilities. And secondly, I mean, injecting methane into the atmosphere is a bad idea because, again, methane is a pollutant. It is not beneficial and we do not want more methane in the atmosphere.
Yeah, well, I meant where they suck methane out. I haven't heard about that. There's a way to capture methane, but okay. So we have all these energy policies going. What should, regardless of anyone's view on climate, what should the path forward be? I'm not going to say what should the solution be because that implies there's a problem. But what should our energy policies be, and what should our way forward be?
Okay, our energy policy should focus on energy systems that are cheap and reliable. And we've already got those, namely fossil fuels. But unfortunately, because of this hoax regarding the climate crisis, people are moving away from these cheap and efficient energy systems and instead are building up unreliable energy systems. And therefore, answering your question, Mark, the path forward should be, again, cheap and reliable energy that could benefit everyone, where everyone can easily have access to these energy systems.
And so what about the idea of solar and wind? They are promoted now. I just saw where, I want to get this number right, Scotland is chopping down 16 million trees to develop wind farms. Is that going to save the climate? And is that good for the environment to chop down 16 million trees?
Okay, the answer to both of your question is no. Absolutely not. I mean, again, first of all, they are contradicting themselves. I mean, they say they want to save the planet, yet they're chopping down trees. That does not make any sense. And as for having wind turbines, I mean, they're not reliable. They require battery storage, which we're still performing research, and they will get more expensive as their penetration to the grid increases. And not to mention, these wind energy systems there's evidence that they have killed birds and bats. And again, they want to save the planet, yet they're chopping down trees and they're killing birds and bats. They're contradicting themselves.
Well, talk a little bit about wind energy, wind and solar. A couple things you'll hear is that A, it's the fastest growing energy, and B, it's the cheapest energy. And look at this, it's so cheap, and also that it employs the most people compared to fossil fuels. So, they make it sound like it's a utopian vision. What's the reality of solar and wind in terms of environmental impact and also in terms of actual energy production compared to fossil fuels?
Okay, so in terms of wind and solar, first of all, they are not efficient and they are intermittent, so they're dependent on the weather. So if the wind is not blowing, your wind turbines will not work. And if the sun is not shining, for example, if it's cloudy, if it's raining, or if it's snowing, then your solar energy systems will not work. Therefore, they're unreliable. And as for cost, I mean, they will cost more because we're still doing research on them. They require battery storage. And as I mentioned, as their penetration to the grid increases, they will become more expensive. And as for their environmental impact, these energy systems require rare earth metals, and mining these rare earth metals are actually environmental disasters. The mining sites are dangerous, and environmentally unfriendly. And as for the environmental impact, if you, let's say you want to dispose of a solar panel, then you have to be very careful and dispose of them carefully, because the chemicals in those solar panels are highly toxic, and they can leach. If they leach into the soil, they could cause a lot of problem. And as for wind turbines, I mean, as I mentioned, right, they kill a lot of birds and bats, and there's also even evidence that they kill whales. So they're not environmentally friendly, they're not efficient, they're not reliable, and we should not, that's not our way forward. I don't think we should be using these energy systems.
Yeah, in fact, just a brief question on the whales. Off the coast of Jersey, there's been a lot of beached whales coming up, and a lot of the fishermen and even some of the science acknowledge that it could be caused by this, the construction of the wind turbines and some of the noises they make. What do we know about that yet in terms of the whales and the offshore wind?
Actually, I don't have all the facts currently, but I also at one point read that I think even the chemicals that are spilled from these wind systems also kill the whales.
Okay. Yeah, because that's, I always like to joke, where are the 1970s Volvo driving, save the whale liberals when you need them? Because yes. It's amazing. Because if this were, let me ask you this question, if that was a fossil fuel project, say pipeline, and suddenly all these whales were beaching up on the Atlantic beaches, do you think they would have halted the fossil fuel project? And if so, why have they not halted the wind project, if that's the case?
So yes, answering your question, Mark. So if there was a fossil fuel project, yes, there will be a lot of protests, and it is possible that these fossil energy systems would be put on hold until they resolve the problem. Now, as for why people are not protesting the wind turbines is, I guess, several reasons. I mean, one of them is the media. Liberal media or the mainstream media is not covering this topic. And secondly, it doesn't fit their narrative. I mean, right, you're putting the liberal media and the mainstream media between a rock and a hard place. I mean, who should they side for? Should they side with the Save the Whale activists, or should they side with the wind turbine energy system? So therefore, they decide to remain silent on this.
Yeah, and in my personal opinion, they would have shut down even a hint of one whale dying. They would have shut the whole project down indefinitely while they did environmental impact review. But apparently that's not an option for politically favored sources like solar and wind. So, yes. All right, well, we only have a minute left here. Byron, just tell us a little bit about what your organization's planning on doing here in the next year in terms of educating the public. I know you have Dr. Will Happer on your board and Patrick Moore. Yes. Where can we expect the climate debate to head to next?
Okay, so answering your first question, so the CO2 Coalition, what we're planning to do is perform more research using real science to prove, again, that CO2 is beneficial and that fossil fuels are beneficial and that there's no climate crisis. As a matter of fact, the CO2 Coalition has compiled reports on the state of Virginia, the state of Pennsylvania, and the U.S. Midwest, on these topics.
Sorry to interrupt, but we are out of time. This has been Byron Soepyan from the CO2 Coalition. Thanks for listening to the Marc Morano Show.